The autumn wind whispered through Shadow Creek Valley, rustling the golden leaves that lined its cobblestone streets. To most observers, Marcus Chen appeared to be nothing more than the unassuming owner of the town's most popular tea house. His greying temples and wire-rimmed glasses, lending him an air of scholarly gentility. Few would have guessed that his elegant hands, now carefully arranging delicate porcelain cups, had once orchestrated some of the most sophisticated eliminations in modern history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley as a group of riders approached from the east, their horses' hooves kicking up dust along the drought-parched road. Through the tea house's specially reinforced windows, Marcus observed their approach with practiced detachment. 5 men, heavily armed, moving with the calculated swagger of those accustomed to taking what they wanted. Their leader, a towering figure with a distinctive red bandana and a customized lever-action rifle slung across his back, carried himself with the authority of someone who commanded through fear rather than respect. Marcus continued his methodical preparation of the evening service, his movements precise and unhurried. To his regular customers, this was simply his usual dedication to the art of tea ceremony. None would have recognized these gestures as the same ones he had once used to maintain his tools of assassination, each motion serving to center his mind while gathering intelligence about potential threats. The Raven Syndicate's getting bolder, remarked Elizabeth Foster, the town's librarian, as she sipped her oolong tea at her usual corner table. 3 towns hit in the past month, each one stripped clean before the territorial marshals could even respond. Nay, her words carried the weight of carefully gathered information, Elizabeth's passion for news and details making her an unwitting intelligence asset. Marcus hummed non-committally as he adjusted the position of a teacup by a fraction of an inch. Through the reflection in the polished copper kettle, he tracked the riders as they dismounted outside the town's only bank. The leader's confidence, the way his men immediately moved to establish control of the street. These weren't ordinary bandits. Their precision spoke of military training, their coordination suggesting they had graduated from simple robbery to something more organized. The tea house had been carefully chosen when Marcus first arrived in Shadow Creek 5 years ago. Its elevated position provided clear sightlines down the main street, while its reputation for serving the finest tea between San Francisco and Denver gave him a natural reason to receive visitors and packages from across the country. The fact that its basement connected to a network of old mining tunnels was a detail known only to him. Interesting choice of timing, Marcus murmured, more to himself than to Elizabeth. The Raven Syndicate's previous attacks had all occurred at dawn, when most towns were just beginning to stir. This late afternoon approach marked a tactical shift, one that suggested either growing confidence or declining caution. Either way, it would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. The riders had positioned themselves with tactical precision. 2 guarding the bank's entrance, 2 covering the street, and their leader striding purposefully toward the bank's doors. Their weapons, Marcus noted, were well maintained and customized, indicating access to resources beyond the usual bandit gang. The red bandana leader carried himself with the bearing of someone who had served in the military, possibly cavalry, given his posture in the saddle. "Mr. Chen?" Young Tommy Watson's voice carried a note of urgency as the 12-year-old burst through the tea house doors. "Ma says to tell you that visitors are coming." The boy's eyes darted meaningfully toward the bank, his message carrying layers of meaning that would have seemed innocent to any observers. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Sarah Watson, Tommy's mother and the town's telegraph operator, had proven to be an unexpectedly valuable ally over the years. Her position gave her access to all incoming communications, and she had developed an impressive knack for reading between the lines of seemingly innocent messages. "Thank you, Tommy. Please tell your mother I appreciate the warning about visitors. I'll prepare accordingly." Marcus's words carried their own subtle weight. It was a code they had developed over time, one that would set in motion preparations throughout the town that appeared entirely innocent to outsiders. The boy nodded and darted out, already moving to deliver similar, innocent messages to other key members of the community. Marcus had spent years building this network, identifying people whose regular routines could serve dual purposes. The baker, whose daily flour deliveries mapped patrol routes. The school teacher, whose bell schedule could signal different types of threats. The stable master, whose arrangement of horses could indicate safe houses and escape routes. Through the window, Marcus watched as the red bandana leader emerged from the bank, his posture suggesting the conversation inside hadn't gone as planned. The man's hand rested casually on his holster as he spoke to his lieutenants, his gesture toward the other buildings carrying clear threat. Marcus began the precise movements of preparing a special blend of high mountain oolong, each gesture serving to focus his mind while concealing his observations. The Raven Syndicate had a reputation for escalating violence when faced with resistance. Their last target, a mining town in the next territory, had lost its sheriff and half its council before surrendering their treasury. Elizabeth Foster closed her book and stood, smoothing her skirts with deliberate care. "I should return these historical volumes to the library. Wouldn't want them to be damaged if any excitement occurs." Her words carried meaning beyond their surface, and Marcus nodded slightly. The library's basement housed more than just books. Its reinforced walls and hidden storage areas had been carefully prepared long ago. As Elizabeth departed, Marcus noted how the bandits' attention tracked her movement. Their eyes lingered, too long, their postures shifting subtly. They were watching everyone who moved through the street, cataloguing potential hostages or threats. Professional behavior, suggesting this wasn't just another random gang. The sun continued its descent toward the mountains, painting Shadow Creek in shades of amber and gold. To any observer, the scene would have appeared peaceful, a quiet mountain town preparing for evening, shopkeepers beginning to close up, children being called home for supper. None would have noticed how Tommy Watson's route home took him past specific houses, how Elizabeth Foster's walk to the library allowed her to signal through certain windows, how the blacksmith's hammering carried rhythms that conveyed information to those who knew how to listen. Marcus began his evening ritual of closing the tea house, each movement precise and measured. The copper kettles were polished to mirror shine, allowing him to track movement in the street without turning. The delicate porcelain cups were arranged in patterns that would appear decorative to most, but would serve as impromptu weapons if needed. The heavy oak door was barred with a beam that had been precisely weighted and balanced for multiple purposes. The red bandana leader had gathered his men, their discussion carrying the tone of planning rather than immediate action. Marcus recognized the pattern. They would wait, establish surveillance, identify key targets and weaknesses. It was exactly what he would have done in their position, exactly what he had done countless times before retiring to this quiet valley. As darkness began to settle over Shadow Creek, Marcus lit the lanterns that would illuminate his tea house through the evening. Each flame was carefully positioned to cast specific shadows, to create blind spots that could serve as advantages rather than vulnerabilities. The peaceful facade of the establishment belied its carefully crafted defensive capabilities. The Raven Syndicate was about to discover that their carefully planned operation had led them into something far more dangerous than a simple mountain town. They had unknowingly walked into the domain of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of turning peaceful scenes into lethal environments, who had transformed everyday objects into weapons, and who had taught an entire community to hide. Strength behind seeming vulnerability, Shadow Creek was about to demonstrate why it had remained untouched by the wave of violence sweeping the territories. The retired assassin who had chosen it as his home was about to remind the world why his services had once commanded prices that could buy small kingdoms, and why retirement hadn't dulled any of his lethal capabilities. At the far end of town, Reverend Miles began his evening walk, his black coat and silver cross catching the last rays of sunlight. His path took him past key positions throughout Shadow Creek, his presence both a comfort to residents and a carefully coordinated part of Marcus's surveillance network. The Reverend's chosen route would allow him to discreetly assess the Raven Syndicate's positions while appearing to perform his usual pastoral duties. Inside the tea house, Marcus began preparing a special blend of tea he reserved for particularly significant evenings. The rare black tea, imported from mountains halfway across the world, had once served as his signature, a final courtesy offered to targets who had earned his respect. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose, its complex aroma masking other more subtle scents that might prove useful as events unfolded. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus observed two more riders approaching from the east, reinforcements for the syndicate arriving exactly as he would have arranged. In their position, their arrival pattern suggested military training, likely former cavalry scouts, given their positioning and approach. This brought the total to 7, with possibly more waiting in reserve. The town's daily routines continued, each movement and interaction carrying hidden meaning. The seamstress closing her shop placed specific colored fabrics in her window, a code indicating she had observed armed men checking the building's rear approaches. The local doctor finished his rounds, his choice of paths communicating which houses had been marked for special attention by the bandits. Marcus's thoughts drifted briefly to the hidden room beneath his tea house, where an arsenal of specialized equipment lay waiting, tools and weapons collected from across the globe during his former career, each modified and maintained with the same precision he now applied to brewing tea. Equipment that hadn't seen use since he'd chosen this peaceful valley as his sanctuary, but which remained as lethal as the day he'd acquired them. The red bandana leader had taken position in the saloon across the street, his choice of location, revealing both tactical awareness and a crucial oversight. The saloon's elevated position provided excellent views of the main street, but its recently renovated interior, work done by contractors Marcus had specifically chosen, included several architectural features that would prove problematic for anyone attempting to use it as a defensive position. As the last direct sunlight faded from Shadow Creek, the town's lamplighter began his rounds. Old Jim had been a cavalry signalman during the war, and his pattern of lighting the street lamps could convey detailed information to those who knew how to read it. Tonight, his routine indicated that the syndicate had positioned at least 3 more men in the buildings along the south side of the street. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus watched Tommy Watson complete his messenger rounds and return home, the boy's route having taken him past every key position in town. The messages he delivered, hidden within innocent requests and greetings, would ensure every member of the community knew their role in what was to come. Shadow Creek's residents had spent years practicing responses to various scenarios, each person playing their part in a complex defensive strategy that appeared entirely natural to outside observers. The autumn wind carried the scent of wood smoke and approaching rain, weather that would work to the town's advantage if violence erupted during the night. Marcus had chosen Shadow Creek for many reasons: its natural terrain, its strategic position, its potential for defense, but it was the people who had transformed it from a hiding place into something worth protecting. These residents, who had unknowingly been trained by one of history's most effective assassins, had become something unique. A community that could shift from peaceful town to coordinated defense force without any obvious transition. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the valley as Marcus prepared for the evening ahead. The Raven Syndicate had chosen Shadow Creek as their next target, unaware that they had just initiated a sequence of events that would end their reign of terror. Their military training, their coordinated tactics, their careful planning, all of it would prove insufficient against a man who had spent decades elevating death to an art form, and who had transformed an entire town into his masterpiece of defensive strategy. As night settled fully over Shadow Creek, Marcus Chen allowed himself a moment of silent appreciation for the irony of the situation. The Raven Syndicate sought to prey upon what they perceived as a vulnerable town, unaware that they had walked into the carefully prepared domain of someone who had once been known in select circles as the Ghost of Shanghai, the assassin whose methods were so subtle that his targets appeared to have died from natural causes. They were about to learn why Marcus's services had commanded prices that could bankrupt nations, and why, even in retirement, he remained one of the most lethal individuals in the Western Territories. Thunder rolled across Shadow Creek Valley as Marcus Chen's mind drifted to the path that had led him to this moment. His hands moved automatically through the familiar motions of preparing evening service, each gesture carrying the same precision he had once applied to far deadlier tasks. The delicate clink of porcelain against porcelain took him back to Shanghai, 1865, where his journey had begun in an ancient temple hidden within the city's winding alleys. The temple had appeared ordinary to passers-by, just another shrine among hundreds. But beneath its peaceful facade, the Order of the Silent Lotus had maintained a centuries-old tradition of training elite operatives who specialized in making death appear natural. Young Marcus, then known by another name, had been chosen for his extraordinary attention to detail and unshakable calm under pressure. Through the tea-house window, he observed the Raven Syndicate's leader conferring with his lieutenants. Their military bearing reminded him of his first major contract, a corrupt British Army officer who had been terrorizing local merchants. The man had died seemingly of natural causes, his tea mysteriously contaminated by a rare herb that mimicked the symptoms of heart failure. It had been Marcus's introduction to the art of invisible elimination. Elizabeth Foster returned to the tea-house, her movements carrying subtle tension. As she settled at her usual table, Marcus's thoughts turned to Paris, 1870, where he had posed as a librarian for 3 months to gain access to a target. The experience had taught him the value of patience and the power of appearing ordinary. It had also taught him to appreciate how much information flowed through places of learning, a lesson that made Elizabeth's role in Shadow Creek's intelligence network particularly fitting. "More oolong, please," Elizabeth requested, her tone carrying layers of meaning, like the courtesan in Vienna who had taught Marcus the art of coded communication through seemingly innocent conversation. That assignment had required him to establish an entire network of informants within the city's social elite, each one unaware of their role in a complex operation that ultimately led to the bloodless removal of an entire criminal organization. The autumn wind rattled the tea-house windows, each specially reinforced pane, a reminder of lessons learned in Moscow. The Russian winter had taught him the importance of securing every potential entry point, of transforming a space into both fortress and trap. The Bratva enforcer, who had thought him an easy target, had learned too late about the dangers of underestimating seemingly peaceful surroundings. Thunder cracked again, closer now, as Marcus noted movement in the street. The Syndicate's scouts were establishing surveillance positions, unknowingly placing themselves exactly where he wanted them. Their methodology reminded him of the mercenary group he had encountered in Constantinople, professional soldiers who had failed to realize that their own tactical training made their actions predictable to someone who understood military doctrine. Young Tommy Watson slipped into the tea house again, ostensibly seeking shelter from the approaching storm. The boy's natural talent for moving unnoticed, for gathering and relaying information, reminded Marcus of his own apprenticeship. Master Chen, the man whose name Marcus had later adopted in tribute, had recognized that same potential, teaching him that the most effective operative was one who could seamlessly blend into any environment. "The desert blooms after rain," Tommy commented casually, using a phrase Marcus had taught him. The seemingly innocent observation carried vital intelligence about the syndicate's movements. Marcus had learned the value of such innocent-seeming code phrases during an operation in Cairo, where local children had proved invaluable in tracking the movements of a well-connected slave trader. The memory of Cairo brought with it thoughts of Hassan, the only other operative who had ever come close to matching Marcus's skill. Their final confrontation in Marrakesh had taught him the importance of having multiple layers of contingency plans. Hassan had anticipated every conventional strategy, but in the end had fallen victim to the one thing he hadn't expected: mercy. The lesson had stayed with Marcus. Sometimes the most effective weapon was the one you chose not to use. Lightning illuminated the street, casting harsh shadows that reminded Marcus of Hong Kong's neon-lit alleys. That operation had marked a turning point in his career, the first time he had chosen to protect rather than eliminate. The young girl he had been sent to silence, a witness to high-level corruption, had instead become his first student in the art of survival. Her training had shown him that his skills could serve purposes beyond dealing death. The tea house's evening lanterns cast a warm glow that belied their tactical positioning. Each light source had been carefully placed to create specific shadows, to direct attention in particular ways, to influence how people moved through the space. These were lessons learned in the theatres of London, where Marcus had studied stagecraft, as a cover, while eliminating a human trafficking ring. Understanding how to manipulate perception has proved as valuable as any physical technique. Reverend Miles passed by the window again, his route taking him past the saloon where the syndicate's leader had established his temporary headquarters. The sight stirred memories of Rome, where Marcus had posed as a priest for 6 months. The experience had taught him that people rarely questioned those who appeared to serve a higher purpose, and that faith could be as effective a cover as any elaborate disguise. The scent of rain began to permeate the air as Marcus prepared another pot of tea. The blend was special, imported from the same mountains where he had trained in the art of herbalism. Master Chen had taught him that knowledge of plants could heal or harm, that the same substance could be medicine or poison depending on its preparation. It was a lesson that had served him well during his active years, and one that continued to prove valuable in his current role as Shadow Creek's tea house proprietor. A flash of movement in the street caught his attention. One of the syndicates, men moving with the distinctive gait of someone favoring an old injury. It reminded him of Singapore, where he had learned to read bodies like books, to understand the stories written in how people moved, held themselves, distributed their weight. That knowledge had saved his life during the ambush in Saigon, allowing him to identify undercover assassins by subtle tells in their posture and movement. Elizabeth Foster's book, Marcus noticed, was a volume on local mining history. The choice was deliberate. Within its pages were detailed maps of the tunnel system beneath Shadow Creek, tunnels that Marcus had spent years modifying. Like the catacombs beneath Prague, where he had orchestrated the downfall of a corrupt government minister, these passages could serve as both escape routes and tactical advantage. The wind carried conversations from the street, fragments of discussion between the syndicate's men as they established their presence in town. Their attempts at subtle communication reminded Marcus of the Yakuza enforcers in Kyoto, who had similarly underestimated the importance of controlling not just actions but information. That operation had taught him that victory often depended more on controlling what others knew than on any physical confrontation. As the storm drew closer, Marcus allowed himself a moment to appreciate how his years of experience had transformed. Shadow Creek. Every lesson learned in blood and shadow across the globe had been adapted, refined, and implemented in ways that served protection rather than elimination. The town had become his masterpiece, a community that appeared utterly ordinary, while concealing layers of sophisticated defense that would have impressed even his old masters at the Silent Lotus Temple. Tommy Watson's mother, Sarah, passed by the tea house window, her pace and path carrying meaning to those who knew how to read such things. Her natural talent for coordinating information flow reminded Marcus of the network he had built in Amsterdam. Ordinary citizens who had become extraordinary assets simply by paying attention to their surroundings and understanding how to share what they observed. The first heavy drops of rain began to fall as Marcus completed his evening preparations. Each movement, each placement, each detail had been refined by decades of experience across continents and cultures. The Raven Syndicate, with all their military training and tactical expertise, had unknowingly challenged someone who had turned death into an art form before choosing to become a protector instead of a destroyer. Shadow Creek was about to demonstrate why it had remained peaceful in increasingly violent territories, not through obvious strength or visible defenses, but through the subtle mastery of a man who had learned his craft in the world's deadliest shadows before choosing to use those skills to preserve life rather than end it. Dr. Samuel Harrison's arrival at the tea house carried with it memories of Stockholm, where Marcus had mastered the art of using medical knowledge for both healing and harm. The town doctor's practiced eye for detail and steady hands had reminded Marcus of his own training in anatomy and physiology, skills that had once served lethal purposes but now supported Shadow Creek's defensive network in more subtle ways. Evening. Tea helps steady the nerves, the doctor remarked casually, settling into a corner seat that offered clear views of both the street and the tea house's main entrance. His comment carried echoes of Marcus's time in Switzerland, where he had learned that the most effective covers were those built on genuine expertise. The tea ceremonies that now formed his daily routine had begun as a means of understanding precise measurements and timing, crucial skills for an assassin who specialized in untraceable elimination. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the street in stark contrast. The brief burst of light revealed one of the syndicate's men attempting to gain access to the boarding house's rear entrance. The man's technique reminded Marcus of Budapest, where he had encountered a rival operative, attempting similar infiltration methods. That encounter had taught him the value of preparing multiple layers of security, each one appearing natural while serving specific defensive purposes. The sound of piano music drifted from the saloon, Kate Morrison's evening performance beginning right on schedule. Her music, like everything else in Shadow Creek, served multiple purposes. The tempo and song selection conveyed information about the syndicate's movements within the establishment, much as the street musicians in Barcelona had once helped Marcus track his targets through the city's labyrinthine alleys. Thunder rolled again as Marcus recalled his final active mission, the operation in San Francisco that had led him to choose Shadow Creek as his sanctuary. The target had been a man much like the Raven Syndicate's leader, competent, well-prepared, and utterly confident in his control of the situation. The decision to spare that target's life had marked Marcus's transition from eliminator to protector, though the skills remained as sharp as ever. Dr. Harrison's quiet observation of the street carried the same careful attention to detail that Marcus had learned in the markets of Istanbul. Every movement, every interaction, every subtle shift in body language told a story to those who knew how to read such signs. The doctor's medical training had made him an ideal student of these observation techniques, his professional demeanor providing perfect cover for gathering intelligence. The approaching storm's pressure change brought a familiar ache to Marcus's left shoulder, a souvenir from Venice, where a moment's hesitation had nearly cost him his life. That experience had taught him that mercy must be tempered with wisdom, that sometimes the most compassionate action was swift and decisive intervention. It was a lesson that would soon prove relevant to Shadow Creek's current situation. Young, Tommy Watson returned once more, this time carrying what appeared to be homework. The papers, Marcus knew, contained coded updates from the town's outer defensive positions. The system reminded him of the message networks he had established in Damascus, where children playing in the streets had provided his most reliable intelligence-gathering system. The wind's direction shifted, carrying with it the scent of horses and gun oil from the syndicate's positions. Marcus's enhanced awareness of environmental details had been honed in the jungles of Burma, where survival often depended on noticing subtle changes in the natural world. Those same skills now helped him maintain constant awareness of threats to his adopted home. Dr. Harrison's quiet conversation with Elizabeth Foster carried undertones of coordination that would have been invisible to untrained observers. Their discussion of recent medical texts and library acquisitions concealed the exchange of vital information about the syndicate's movements, much like the salon conversations Marcus had orchestrated in Vienna to monitor political conspiracies. As night settled more firmly over Shadow Creek, Marcus allowed himself a moment to appreciate how his past experiences had prepared him for this moment. Every assignment, every operation, every lesson learned in Blood and Shadow had contributed to creating something unique, a town that could defend itself without ever appearing defensive, a community that could coordinate complex operations while seeming entirely ordinary. The Raven Syndicate, with all their military precision and tactical expertise, had unknowingly initiated a sequence of events that would demonstrate why Marcus Chen had once been considered the world's most effective operative. Not because of his ability to eliminate targets, though that skill remained razor-sharp, but because of his mastery of turning ordinary places and people into extraordinary defensive systems. Shadow Creek was about to prove that true strength lies not in visible displays of power, but in the careful preparation and coordination of an entire community trained by someone who had elevated subtle warfare to an art form. The approaching storm would bring with it a demonstration of why Marcus's services had once commanded prices that could destabilize economies, and why his choice to become a protector had made him even more formidable than he had been as an assassin. The storm's intensity grew as darkness settled over Shadow Creek, the rhythmic drumming of rain against the tea-house windows creating a natural cover for quiet movement. Marcus observed the subtle shifts in the town's evening routine, changes that would appear perfectly natural to outsiders while serving the community's defensive preparations. Kate Morrison's piano music from the saloon shifted to a particularly complex piece, her fingers dancing across the keys in patterns that conveyed crucial information. The syndicate's men had begun questioning locals, their approach revealing both professional training and a dangerous underestimation of the town's residents. Their leader, still stationed in the saloon's upper room, had sent runners to establish communication with additional forces hidden in the surrounding hills. Through the tea-house's front window, Marcus watched as Sheriff Collins made his evening rounds. The lawman's seemingly casual patrol contained precise timing and positioning that would have impressed military strategists. His path took him past every critical point in town while appearing entirely routine, his presence a calculated element in Shadow Creek's defensive grid. "Strange weather for this time of year," Dr. Harrison commented, his tone measured as he accepted a fresh cup of tea. The observation carried tactical significance. The storm's unusual patterns would affect visibility, sound carrying distance, and the effectiveness of the syndicate's posted lookouts. Nature itself seemed to be aligning with Shadow Creek's defensive strategy. The town's evening activities continued their carefully choreographed dance. The general store's closing routine included specific arrangements of lanterns that provided coded updates about the syndicate's movements. The blacksmith's workshop remained active, the rhythm of his hammer against metal transmitting detailed information about enemy positions to those who understood the code. Sarah Watson emerged from the telegraph office, her passage down the street timed perfectly to coincide with a group of returning miners. The casual interaction that followed appeared entirely natural, while allowing the exchange of vital intelligence about movements in the surrounding hills. The miners, their faces weathered by years underground, had intimate knowledge of every tunnel and shaft around Shadow Creek, knowledge that would prove invaluable in the hours to come. Inside the tea house, Marcus continued his precise movements while monitoring multiple layers of activity. Elizabeth Foster's seemingly absorbed reading was actually a careful observation of the syndicate's men through the library's strategically placed windows. Tommy Watson's homework, spread across a corner table, contained coded messages about the bandits' weapons and equipment. The rain intensified, driving most of the town's regular foot traffic indoors. This natural concentration of people in key buildings was part of Shadow Creek's defensive design. Each structure had been carefully modified over the years to serve as both shelter and strategic position. The boarding house, run by the widow Clara Bennett, could transform from comfortable lodging to fortified position with subtle adjustments to its seemingly decorative furnishings. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus noted the arrival of another figure, Jacob Stone, the town's carpenter, moving with purpose despite the weather. Stone's work over the past 5 years had gradually transformed Shadow Creek's buildings, his skilled hands adding hidden features and defensive capabilities that blended seamlessly with the town's rustic appearance. Every repair, every renovation has been an opportunity to strengthen the community's protective infrastructure. The syndicate's leader emerged briefly onto the saloon's balcony, his silhouette illuminated by lightning. His bearing suggested military experience, possibly cavalry given his stance, but his current position revealed a crucial oversight. The balcony's ornate railing, recently replaced by stone, contained features that could rapidly transform the overlook from tactical advantage to vulnerability. Kate Morrison's music shifted again, the complex melody carrying subtle warnings. 2 of the syndicate's men had begun questioning her about the town's routines, unaware that her responses were carefully crafted to mislead. Their questions revealed their immediate intentions, while their body language betrayed deeper strategic plans. To those trained to observe such details, Marcus prepared a special blend of tea as he processed the incoming information. The syndicate's approach followed predictable patterns: establish presence, gather intelligence, identify key targets, then strike with overwhelming force. Their methodology suggested professional training combined with extensive experience, but it also revealed their fundamental weakness. They expected to encounter ordinary townspeople rather than a carefully prepared defensive network. Sheriff Collins completed another circuit, his route sharing fresh intelligence through carefully timed interactions with townspeople. The law enforcement officer's genuine dedication to the community had made him an ideal partner in Marcus's defensive strategy. His official position provided perfect cover for coordinating Shadow Creek's security, while his natural instincts for protection aligned perfectly with their shared mission. The storm's intensity peaked, temporarily drowning out other sounds. Marcus used the moment to make subtle adjustments to the tea house's defenses. Each movement, from shifting a chair to rearranging cups, served tactical purposes while appearing as nothing more than standard evening preparation. The syndicate's observers, watching through rain-streaked windows, saw only a meticulous shopkeeper attending to his business. Dr. Harrison's presence in the tea house carried additional significance as the situation developed. His medical bag contained more than just standard supplies, each instrument and medication carefully chosen to serve multiple purposes. The doctor's ability to treat injuries would prove as valuable as his capacity to create strategic advantages. Through carefully applied medical knowledge, the sound of horses approaching through the rain drew careful attention. A supply wagon arrived, right on schedule, driven by Martha Chen, no relation to Marcus, but a key member of Shadow Creek's defensive network. Her regular deliveries provided perfect cover for moving equipment and supplies throughout the town, while her trading routes gathered intelligence from surrounding communities. Marcus noted how the syndicate's men paid particular attention to Martha's wagon, their interest revealing gaps in their intelligence about the town. They saw an ordinary supply delivery rather than a carefully coordinated resupply operation. Their focus on obvious movements meant they missed the subtle exchanges happening in plain sight. Tommy Watson made one final pass through the tea house, his departure marking the transition into evening operations. The boy's innocent appearance belied his crucial role in Shadow Creek's intelligence network. His natural talent for observation, combined with the training Marcus had carefully provided, made him an invaluable asset in monitoring the syndicate's movements. As night settled more firmly over the valley, Shadow Creek's transformation continued. Beneath its peaceful surface, every resident played their part in a complex defensive strategy that had been years in the making. The general store's closing routine included specific arrangements of merchandise that would provide tactical advantages. If needed, the livery stable's evening feeding schedule positioned horses for quick evacuation or strategic deployment. The syndicate's leader returned to his command post in the saloon's upper room, unaware that his chosen headquarters was at the center of a carefully prepared defensive grid. Kate Morrison's piano music provided constant updates about movements within the building, while the structure itself had been modified over years to serve Shadow Creek's protective strategy. Marcus completed his evening tea service as Shadow Creek's defensive network continued its invisible operations. Each resident understood their role in the coming conflict, their ordinary routines, concealing careful preparation and coordination. The storm provided perfect cover for final preparations, while the syndicate's professional methodology made their actions predictable to those who understood military tactics. Through the rain-streaked windows, Marcus observed the subtle signs of his community's readiness. Sheriff Collins positioned deputies in key locations under the cover of routine patrols. Dr. Harrison prepared his clinic for potential casualties while maintaining his cover as a concerned citizen. Elizabeth Foster's organization of library records concealed the coordination of intelligence from multiple sources. The Raven Syndicate had chosen Shadow Creek as their next target, unaware that their military precision and tactical expertise were about to be turned against them. They saw a peaceful mountain town ripe for exploitation, failing to recognize that every aspect of its apparent vulnerability had been carefully crafted by someone who had mastered the art of turning ordinary places into extraordinary defensive positions. A flicker of movement near the bank caught Marcus's attention. Abigail Chen, the bank manager's daughter, was closing the heavy curtains in precise patterns, each movement conveying specific information about the syndicate's attempts to gather intelligence about the vault's security. Her father, James Chen, had implemented Marcus's suggestions for upgrading the bank's defenses while maintaining its appearance as a typical small-town financial institution. The rain's intensity provided cover for Clara Bennett to move between buildings, her black mourning dress blending perfectly with the storm-darkened streets. The widow's boarding house served as a crucial hub in Shadow Creek's defensive network, its position allowing her to monitor movement along the town's main thoroughfare while maintaining the appearance of a genteel establishment. Through the tea house windows, Marcus observed new patterns emerging in the syndicate's deployment. Their men had begun establishing secondary positions, their choices revealing both professional training and critical misunderstandings about Shadow Creek's layout. Each location they selected had been carefully prepared over the years to serve the town's defensive strategy rather than provide the tactical advantages they assumed. Kate Morrison's piano music shifted to a complex Hungarian rhapsody, the challenging piece requiring such focus that none would suspect its true purpose. The melody carried detailed information about conversations overheard in the saloon, the syndicate's plans for securing the town, their assumptions about local resistance, their timeline for bringing in additional forces. Dr. Harrison set aside his tea with deliberate care, his movements signaling the completion of another phase in Shadow Creek's preparation. The medical clinic's basement had been gradually stocked with supplies that served both healing and strategic purposes, each item carefully chosen to maintain plausible deniability while providing crucial resources for the coming conflict. The storm's thunder provided cover for Jacob Stone to complete modifications to several buildings along the main street. His work crews, appearing to simply protect structures from the weather, were actually finalizing defensive preparations that had been years in the making. Each board, each nail, each seemingly routine repair contributed to transforming Shadow Creek into an integrated defensive position. Martha Chen's supply wagon made its final delivery of the evening, the routine operation, concealing the distribution of specific items throughout key positions in town. Her trading network, established over years of careful relationship building, provided not just goods, but also crucial intelligence about movements and activities throughout the territory. Sheriff Collins paused near the tea house, ostensibly taking shelter from the rain. His casual stance belied the significance of his position. From this vantage point, he could observe the syndicate's men attempting to establish surveillance points around the bank. Their choices confirmed Marcus's assessment of their tactical doctrine, making their future moves predictable to those who understood military strategy. The smithy's rhythmic hammering continued despite the late hour, the sound carrying coded updates about movement in the town's outlying areas. Robert Smith's forge served as more than just a repair station. His work had gradually equipped Shadow Creek with tools and implements that could quickly convert to defensive purposes while maintaining completely innocent appearances. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus noted another subtle shift in the evening's patterns. The syndicate's men had begun showing signs of confusion, their movements suggesting growing uncertainty about their assessment of the town. Their military training, which emphasized controlling territory through visible force, left them ill-equipped to recognize or counter Shadow Creek's invisible defensive preparations. Young Tommy Watson made one final appearance, his school books clutched protectively against the rain. The homework visible through his open satchel contained detailed observations about the syndicate's equipment, their weapons, their communications methods, all gathered through careful observation and encoded in what appeared to be ordinary schoolwork. Sarah Watson's position at the telegraph office had proven invaluable as the situation developed. Her ability to monitor and control information flow in and out of Shadow Creek provided crucial advantages in anticipating and countering the syndicate's operations. Each message she handled was carefully screened and, when necessary, subtly modified to support the town's defensive strategy. The rain's steady drumming masked the sound of final preparations throughout Shadow Creek. Each resident continued their normal evening routines while executing carefully rehearsed defensive measures. The general store's inventory had been quietly rearranged to create specific paths of movement and fields of fire. The livery stable's horses were positioned to provide quick evacuation options while appearing to simply be arranged for the night. Elizabeth Foster's careful observation from her position in the tea house revealed new details about the syndicate's command structure. Their leader's interactions with his men suggested recent internal changes in their organization, information that could prove crucial in the coming confrontation. Her years of studying human behavior through her work at the library had made her an expert in reading such subtle social dynamics. As night settled more firmly over Shadow Creek, Marcus noted how each element of the town's defense network had activated without any obvious signal or command. The community he had carefully trained over 5 years demonstrated why subtle preparation and coordinated response could prove more effective than obvious strength. Every resident understood their role in the coming conflict, their ordinary activities concealing extraordinary preparation. The syndicate's leader remained in his command post, unaware that his chosen headquarters had been deliberately prepared to serve Shadow Creek's defensive strategy. Kate Morrison's music continued to provide updates about movements within the building, while the structure itself had been modified over years to control and direct any conflict that might erupt. Through the storm's veil, Shadow Creek continued its invisible transformation from peaceful town to integrated defensive position. Each resident played their part in a strategy that had been years in development, their ordinary routines concealing careful preparation and coordination. The rain provided perfect cover for final preparations, while the syndicate's professional methodology made their actions predictable to those who understood military tactics. The Raven Syndicate's leader, Colonel James Red Jack Harrison, stood at the saloon's rain-streaked window, his scarred hands clasped behind his back. The military bearing that had once commanded respect in the Union Army now served a darker purpose. Through the storm's veil, he studied Shadow Creek with the calculated precision that had made him one of the most feared tactical commanders during the war. His red bandana, now a symbol of terror across 3 territories, had originally marked him as part of the 7th Cavalry's elite reconnaissance unit. The skills honed during military service had been perverted after the war, transformed into tools for methodically stripping towns of their resources. Yet, there was nothing random about the syndicate's operations. Each target was carefully chosen, each assault meticulously planned. "Report," he commanded softly as Lieutenant Michael Walsh entered the room. Walsh, another former cavalry officer, had served under Harrison during the war. The lieutenant's precision in gathering intelligence had once saved entire battalions. Now it served to identify vulnerable communities for exploitation. "Sounds exactly as our sources indicated, Colonel," Walsh began, his voice carrying the clipped tones of military briefing. "Bank holds the monthly payroll for 3 mining operations, minimal law enforcement presence, no telegraph connection to major settlements." Each detail reinforced their assessment of Shadow Creek as an ideal target. Through the tea house window, Marcus observed the interaction while preparing evening service. His trained eye caught details others might miss, the way Harrison's men maintained military formation even in civilian clothing, how their patrol patterns followed cavalry doctrine, the subtle signs that revealed their unit's history. In the saloon's upper room, Harrison processed Walsh's report with methodical precision. Shadow Creek appeared to match their preferred target profile perfectly, isolated, prosperous, and seemingly defenseless. Yet something about the town's peaceful atmosphere triggered warnings in his tactical mind, instincts honed through years of warfare and predation. "The bank manager?" Harrison inquired, his question revealing layers of strategic thinking. Understanding key personnel was crucial to the syndicate's methodology. "James Chen, sir. Immigrants run a tight operation, no obvious security beyond standard measures. Walsh's report continued, each detail fitting their established patterns for selecting targets. What neither man recognized was how their very professionalism made their actions predictable to someone trained to understand military methodology. Harrison's gaze swept the rain-drenched street, his tactical assessment missing crucial details by focusing on conventional defensive measures. The syndicate's military background, which had served them so well in previous operations, created blind spots that Shadow Creek's subtle preparations exploited perfectly. Interesting choice of location, Harrison mused, studying the town's layout. His military training recognized the strategic positioning of key buildings, the clear lines of sight, the natural choke points. Yet he interpreted these features as vulnerabilities to exploit rather than elements of a carefully crafted defensive system. Lieutenant Walsh produced a detailed map marking positions where he'd stationed their men. The syndicate's force had grown since their early days. 20 experienced fighters, most with military backgrounds, supported by a network of scouts and informants throughout the territory. Their operations had evolved from simple robbery to sophisticated tactical assaults that left towns helpless before their overwhelming force. Local law enforcement? Harrison's question carried the weight of experience. Previous encounters with territorial marshals had taught the syndicate the importance of controlling official response. Sheriff Collins, former infantry decorated during the war, runs a clean operation, but nothing we haven't handled before. Walsh's assessment missed crucial details about the law enforcement officer's role in Shadow Creek's defensive network. Harrison's fingers traced paths on the map, his tactical mind plotting approach routes and fallback positions. The storm provided perfect cover for positioning additional forces, while the town's apparent routine continued undisturbed. Yet there was something about Shadow Creek's peaceful atmosphere that nagged at his combat-honed instincts. The tea house. Proprietor, Harrison said suddenly, his attention drawn to the warm glow emanating from Marcus's establishment. What do we know about him? Walsh consulted his notes. Marcus Chen opened the business 5 years ago, popular with locals, keeps to himself, no military background, no obvious connections to law enforcement. The lieutenant's report, though thorough by military standards, failed to penetrate the careful construction of Marcus's cover identity. Harrison's war experiences had taught him to trust his instincts. Something about Shadow Creek felt wrong. Too peaceful, too orderly, too perfect. Yet his military training provided no framework for identifying the subtle defensive network that had been woven into the town's daily life. Curious timing, he noted, watching Kate Morrison's elegant figure at the saloon's piano. Monthly mining payroll arrives tomorrow, 3 operations worth of gold and currency, all concentrated in one small-town bank. The coincidence seemed too perfect, playing directly into the syndicate's operational preferences. The Raven Syndicate had earned its fearsome reputation through methodical operation and overwhelming force. Their military background provided structure and discipline that set them apart from common bandits. Each raid was planned with tactical precision, each target chosen through careful intelligence gathering. Additional forces are in position, sir, Walsh reported. Teams are established at all major approaches to the town. Signal network is operational despite the weather. The lieutenant's efficiency in establishing tactical infrastructure had served them well in previous operations. Harrison nodded, his mind already plotting the next day's assault. The syndicate's standard approach had been refined through numerous successful operations. Establish presence, gather intelligence, identify key personnel, then strike with overwhelming force while controlling all possible responses. Interesting detail about the sheriff, Harrison mused. Infantry background rather than cavalry. Different tactical doctrine, different response patterns. His analysis, though professional, failed to recognize how this very predictability made the syndicate vulnerable to Shadow Creek's defensive strategy. Through the storm's veil, Harrison studied the town's nighttime activities. His military training noted the routine movements, the regular patrols, the ordinary patterns of a peaceful community preparing for evening. Yet something about the scene troubled him, a nagging sense that he was missing crucial details. "Sir," Walsh interjected, "our scouts report unusual traffic patterns in the surrounding hills. Local miners moving equipment, supplying wagons and making late deliveries." The lieutenant's report carried a note of concern, his instincts detecting irregularities in the town's seemingly normal activities. Harrison's scarred face hardened as he processed this information. The syndicate's success had been built on careful planning and precise execution. Any deviation from expected patterns required adjustment to their tactical approach. "Expand surveillance," he ordered. "I want every movement tracked, every pattern analyzed. Something about this town doesn't feel right." His instincts, honed through years of warfare and predation, sensed hidden complexities beneath Shadow Creek's peaceful surface. The rain continued its steady drumming as Harrison refined his assault plan. The syndicate's military background had transformed them into a formidable force, their operations combining tactical precision with overwhelming firepower. Yet this very professionalism made them predictable to someone who understood military doctrine and human nature. What Harrison couldn't know was that his methodical approach, his tactical analysis, his careful preparation, all of it played directly into Shadow Creek's defensive strategy. The town's apparent vulnerability masked a sophisticated network designed specifically to counter military-style operations. Through the tea house window, Marcus noted every detail of the syndicate's deployment, their military precision, their tactical doctrine, their command structure. All of it revealed crucial information about their capabilities and limitations. Shadow Creek's defensive network had been crafted specifically to exploit the blind spots created by conventional military training. Captain Samuel Drake, Harrison's second-in-command, arrived with additional intelligence gathered from their advance. Scouts. Drake's presence added another layer of military expertise to the syndicate's leadership. His experience in Army intelligence operations had proven invaluable in previous raids. His sodden coat bore the subtle signs of hard riding, suggesting he'd personally verified their outlying positions. "Interesting pattern to their supply lines," Drake reported, spreading a detailed map across the saloon's table. Weekly deliveries from 3 different trading companies, all coordinating their schedules. His intelligence background made him more sensitive to unusual patterns, though he failed to recognize the true significance of Shadow Creek's carefully orchestrated routines. Harrison studied the map, his tactical mind processing the information. The syndicate had evolved significantly under his leadership, transforming from a simple criminal gang into a sophisticated military operation. Each member had been chosen for specific skills, each position filled based on battlefield experience rather than mere brutality. "Local mining operations," Drake continued, indicating positions on the map, "more active than initial reports suggested. Regular movement through these valleys, especially after dark." His attention to detail had saved the syndicate from several potential ambushes in previous operations, making him particularly valuable to Harrison's command structure. Lieutenant Walsh interjected, "Something about their patrol patterns seems off, sir. Sheriff's deputies maintain regular routes, but their timing—" He trailed off, military instincts detecting irregularities he couldn't quite define. The very precision of Shadow Creek's defensive measures created patterns that triggered subconscious warnings in trained observers. Harrison moved to the window, studying the rain-slicked street below. The syndicate's evolution, from military unit to criminal enterprise, had been driven by more than mere profit. The chaos following the war had left many soldiers without purpose or direction. Harrison had provided both, channeling their military skills into carefully planned operations that targeted isolated communities. "The livery stable concerns me," Drake noted, marking another position on the map, "too well organized for a frontier operation. Horse positioning, equipment storage, even their feeding schedules. Everything follows military-grade protocols." His observation ironically highlighted how Shadow Creek's defensive preparations appeared as potential threats to those trained in military assessment. Harrison's fingers traced the scar running along his jaw, a souvenir from Shiloh that served as a constant reminder of war's unpredictability. The syndicate's success had been built on controlling variables, on applying overwhelming force to carefully chosen targets. Yet something about Shadow Creek's apparent perfection challenged his tactical instincts. "Sir," Walsh reported, consulting his notebook, "local businesses maintain unusual inventory levels. General store, blacksmith, even the tea house, all stocked well beyond normal frontier requirements." His military training interpreted these preparations as signs of prosperity rather than recognizing their defensive significance. Captain Drake's intelligence background prompted deeper analysis. Community coordination seems unusually efficient. Information flows too smoothly, responses too well organized for a typical frontier town. His observation approached the truth of Shadow Creek's defensive network without quite grasping its full implications. Harrison absorbed these reports with growing concern. The syndicate's military experience had taught them to recognize and exploit weaknesses in civilian communities. Shadow Creek's apparent lack of obvious vulnerabilities represented either exceptional good fortune or carefully planned preparation. "The bank's security measures," Drake continued, "standard procedures, nothing extraordinary. Yet their implementation shows unusual attention to detail." His assessment highlighted how Shadow Creek's defensive preparations were hidden within seemingly normal operations. Walsh added another layer of intelligence. Local residents maintain regular communication patterns, daily routines, social interactions, business operations, all following precise schedules. The lieutenant's report unknowingly described the framework of Marcus's defensive network, interpreting its coordination as merely efficient frontier organization. Harrison's tactical mind processed these details, searching for patterns within patterns. The syndicate's evolution from military unit to criminal enterprise had been marked by constant adaptation and learning. Each operation provided new insights, each success refined their methodology. "Tomorrow's operation," Harrison began, addressing his officers, "requires adjustment. Standard assault patterns may need modification based on local conditions." His military training prompted adaptation to unusual circumstances, though he couldn't identify exactly what about Shadow Creek demanded such caution. Drake's intelligence background surfaced additional concerns. Local mining communities maintain unusually strong connections with the town, regular traffic patterns, coordinated supply lines, integrated defense considerations. His analysis approached dangerous levels of accuracy, though still filtered through conventional military perspective. The storm's intensity provided cover for the syndicate's final preparations, while Harrison refined his assault plan. Their military background had transformed them into a formidable force, their operations combining tactical precision with overwhelming firepower. Yet, this very professionalism made them predictable to someone who understood both military doctrine and human nature. Through the tea-house windows, Marcus observed these developments with practiced calm. The syndicate's military expertise, which had made them so effective against ordinary communities, created exploitable patterns in their planning and execution. Shadow Creek's defensive network had been designed specifically to capitalize on the limitations of conventional tactical thinking. The rain continued its steady drumming as Harrison consolidated his intelligence reports. The syndicate's evolution from military unit to criminal enterprise represented more than simple corruption. It reflected the darker possibilities inherent in military training divorced from moral purpose. Their efficiency, their coordination, their tactical precision all served to make them more effective predators. What Harrison couldn't grasp was how these very strengths would prove to be critical weaknesses when confronting Shadow Creek's unconventional defenses. The town's apparent vulnerability masked a sophisticated network designed specifically to counter military-style operations, turning the syndicate's professional expertise into a strategic liability. The storm's brief lull created a moment of tense silence over Shadow Creek. Through the tea house windows, Marcus observed Lieutenant Walsh and two syndicate soldiers approaching his establishment, their movements carrying the unmistakable rhythm of men accustomed to combat operations. Their attempt at casual demeanor barely masked their tactical assessment of the building's layout. The bell above the tea house door chimed softly as they entered, droplets of rain falling from their coats onto the polished wooden floor. Marcus continued his precise preparation of a rare oolong blend, each movement measured and deliberate. The sonic qualities of the bell's tone carried specific information to those trained to interpret it. 3 men, armed, moving in standard military search formation. "Evening, gentlemen," Marcus greeted them, his voice carrying the perfect measure of polite inquiry expected from a simple shopkeeper. "Our special tonight is high mountain oolong, particularly suitable for such weather." His hands maintained their steady rhythm of preparation, though each motion now served to position specific items within easy reach. Walsh's eyes scanned the tea house interior with professional attention to detail, noting exits, windows, and potential cover positions. His military training made him thorough, but it also made his assessment patterns predictable to someone with Marcus's background. "Quite an establishment you have here, Mr. Chen," the lieutenant remarked, his tone carefully neutral. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus tracked the positions of all 3 men while maintaining his focus on tea preparation. The 2 soldiers had instinctively moved to cover the main exit and the passage to the kitchen, their positioning revealing standard military protocols for controlling enclosed spaces. "Most kind of you to notice," Marcus responded, selecting a specific cup from his collection, one whose seemingly decorative pattern could serve as an improvised weapon if necessary. "We take pride in offering a peaceful atmosphere for our customers." The emphasis on peaceful carried subtle weight, a warning that only those with similar training might detect. Dr. Harrison, still seated in his corner, appeared absorbed in his medical journal while actually monitoring the interaction through its reflection in the window. His presence was not accidental. His position provided optimal observation of both the tea house interior and the street outside. "Peaceful indeed," Walsh agreed, moving closer to the counter. "Though these are troubled times, the territorial governor's very concerned about security in isolated communities like Shadow Creek." His words carried dual purpose, gathering intelligence while establishing pretense for the syndicate's presence. Marcus poured tea with fluid precision, each movement calculated to appear completely focused on his task while maintaining awareness of every subtle shift in the room's tactical dynamics. "Security is always a concern," he acknowledged, though Shadow Creek has been fortunate in that regard. One of the soldiers, younger and less disciplined than Walsh, allowed his hand to drift too close to his concealed weapon when a floorboard creaked unexpectedly. The lieutenant shot him a sharp glance, recognizing how such obvious tells could compromise their intelligence gathering. "Fortunately indeed," Walsh continued, accepting the offered tea with carefully steady hands. Though fortune has a way of changing, recent events in neighboring territories suggest the need for more organized protection. His attempt at subtle threat assessment was obvious to Marcus's trained perception. Elizabeth Foster chose that moment to enter the tea house, her arrival perfectly timed to appear coincidental. Her presence added another layer to the tactical situation, her position as town librarian making her appear harmless while actually providing crucial observation opportunities. "Miss Foster," Marcus greeted her, "your usual table is available." His words carried coded meaning, alerting her to maintain specific sightlines while appearing to simply enjoy her evening tea. The librarian's movement through the space seemed entirely natural while actually positioning her to monitor key angles. Walsh's attention shifted briefly to Elizabeth, his military training automatically assessing potential complications to their tactical situation. Her appearance of absorbed concentration on her book provided perfect cover for observing their every movement and reaction. "You've been in Shadow Creek for a long, Mr. Chen?" Walsh inquired, maintaining his pretense of casual conversation while attempting to gather intelligence. The question probed for weaknesses in Marcus's background, seeking inconsistencies that might prove tactically useful. 5 years this autumn," Marcus replied, his response carrying exactly the right measure of pride and contentment expected from a successful small business owner. "The community has been most welcoming." Each word was carefully chosen to reinforce his cover identity while revealing nothing of strategic value. Through the windows, Marcus noted Captain Drake's arrival at the saloon across the street. The intelligence officer's presence suggested the syndicate was correlating information from multiple sources, building a comprehensive assessment of Shadow Creek's vulnerabilities. "Community is important," Walsh agreed, his eyes continuing their professional assessment of the tea house's layout. "Especially in times like these, recent events in Miller's Canyon, for instance. Tragic how quickly things can change when proper protection isn't in place." The reference to Miller's Canyon, a town recently stripped of resources by the syndicate, carried clear threat beneath its surface concern. Walsh's delivery was professional, but the underlying message was unmistakable to those who understood such diplomatic menace. "Indeed," Marcus responded, his precise movements never faltering as he prepared another pot of tea. "Though circumstances vary greatly between communities, local conditions often prove surprising to those unfamiliar with specific territories." His counter-warning was equally subtle, masked beneath apparent agreement. The younger soldier shifted position slightly, unconsciously responding to the tension building beneath the polite conversation. His movement revealed standard military training in close-quarters combat, though his technique lacked the refinement of Walsh's more experienced posture. Elizabeth turned a page in her book, the sound carrying perfectly in the momentary silence. Her timing was impeccable, breaking the building tension while maintaining her cover of absorbed reading. To untrained observers, she appeared completely oblivious to the dangerous currents flowing beneath the peaceful scene. "Local conditions," Walsh repeated thoughtfully, his tone suggesting professional appreciation of Marcus's subtle parry. "Yes, understanding those can prove crucial, though experience suggests most communities face similar challenges." His implied threat carried additional weight, suggesting the syndicate's confidence in handling any local resistance. Marcus adjusted the position of a teacup by a fraction of an inch, the motion seeming fussy, but actually aligning specific items for potential tactical use. "Similar challenges, perhaps," he acknowledged, though effective solutions often require intimate understanding of local dynamics. Through the copper kettle's reflection, he noted how the second soldier's posture had shifted slightly, unconsciously, preparing for potential conflict. The man's training was evident in his positioning, though his tension revealed uncertainty about the situation's undercurrents. Walsh sipped his tea with careful consideration, his military bearing maintained. despite the seemingly relaxed setting. "Excellent brew," he commented, his appreciation genuine despite the circumstances. "You have a remarkable attention to detail, Mr. Chen." "Detail is crucial in tea preparation," Marcus responded, the double meaning clear to those who understood such exchanges. "The slightest oversight can affect the entire experience." His words carried warning wrapped in wisdom, their deeper significance masked by apparent philosophical musing. Elizabeth's presence continued to complicate the tactical situation, her apparent absorption in her book providing perfect cover for documenting every detail of the interaction. Her position, seemingly chosen for reading light, actually provided optimal observation angles while appearing completely natural. The storm's intensity began to build again, its timing seeming to mirror the growing tension in the tea house. Walsh set his cup down with precise motion, the sound barely audible above the rain. "We should continue this discussion later, Mr. Chen. These are matters that benefit from careful consideration." "My establishment is always open to civil discourse," Marcus replied, his emphasis on civil, carrying clear meaning beneath its polite surface. "Though evening tea often provides the best clarity in complex discussions." The implied suggestion that darkness might bring unwelcome developments was carefully masked beneath hospitality. The soldiers moved toward the door with practiced coordination, their departure maintaining tactical awareness while appearing casual to untrained observers. Walsh lingered momentarily, his professional courtesy masking final assessment of the tea house's layout. "Good evening, Mr. Chen," the lieutenant offered as he departed, his words carrying both threat and respect. "We'll certainly speak again soon." The promise in his tone suggested the syndicate's growing interest in Shadow Creek's apparent complexity. Marcus watched their departure through various reflective surfaces, noting how their movement patterns revealed standard military protocols for withdrawing from potentially hostile situations. Their professional training made them formidable, but it also made their tactical choices predictable to someone with appropriate experience. As the door closed behind them, Marcus began preparing another pot of tea, his movements maintaining their precise rhythm, while his mind processed the encounter's implications. The syndicate's approach confirmed his assessment of their capabilities while revealing crucial details about their operational methodology. Elizabeth turned another page, her position allowing her to track the soldiers' progress down the street through the rain-streaked windows. The encounter had provided valuable intelligence about the syndicate's command structure and tactical doctrine, all gathered while maintaining perfect cover of normal evening activities. The storm's renewed intensity masked the sound of Shadow Creek's defensive network, responding to this initial confrontation. Throughout the town, seemingly ordinary activities carried coded information about the encounter, preparing the community for developments that would soon test every aspect of their carefully crafted preparations. Kate Morrison's piano music drifted across the rain-slicked street from the saloon, its melody shifting to a complex nocturne that conveyed specific information about Walsh's return. The lieutenant's measured stride as he crossed to rejoin Harrison carried subtle tension. The encounter at the tea house had clearly unsettled his tactical assessment of Shadow Creek. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus observed Tommy Watson making his way through the rain, the boy's route seemingly random but actually designed to pass key observation points. His school satchel, protected from the weather by his coat, contained detailed notes about the syndicate soldiers' weapons, equipment, and positioning. Dr. Harrison closed his medical journal with deliberate care, his movement drawing no attention, while positioning him to better observe the street through the window's reflection. "Interesting diagnosis," he commented quietly, his medical metaphor carrying coded assessment of the encounter's implications. Elizabeth Foster's book, Marcus noted, was a volume on regional military history, her choice of reading material, providing perfect cover for documenting tactical details about the syndicate's operational patterns. Her careful observations would prove invaluable in anticipating their next moves. The rains drumming against the windows provided cover for Sarah Watson to pass by the tea house, her seemingly hurried pace disguising the collection of vital intelligence. Her position at the telegraph office made her particularly attuned to changes in communication patterns throughout the territory. Inside the saloon, Harrison received Walsh's report with growing concern. The lieutenant's assessment of Marcus Chen suggested complexities that challenged their tactical assumptions about Shadow Creek. Captain Drake, listening from his position near the window, noted subtle discrepancies between the tea house proprietors' apparent nature and his handling of their diplomatic probe. Clara Bennett's arrival at the tea house appeared perfectly timed for her evening tea, her widow's black dress blending with the storm's shadows. Her position at the counter allowed her to share crucial updates about movement observed from her boarding house, while maintaining the appearance of casual conversation. "The evening blend seems particularly appropriate," she commented, her words carrying coded confirmation of defensive measures enacted throughout the town. Marcus's response, a slight adjustment of the teapot's position, acknowledged receipt of her intelligence while maintaining their cover of ordinary interaction. Sheriff Collins passed by outside, his patrol pattern adjusted to account for the syndicate's recent movements. His law enforcement experience combined with military background made him particularly effective at maintaining Shadow Creek's security while appearing to conduct routine duties. The storm's intensity provided perfect cover for Robert Smith to continue work at his forge, the rhythmic hammering transmitting detailed information about the syndicate's attempts to establish surveillance positions throughout town. His work had gradually equipped Shadow Creek with tools that could serve multiple purposes when needed. Marcus began preparing for evening closure, each movement carefully calculated to position specific items for potential tactical use while appearing completely routine. The syndicate's initial probe had confirmed his assessment of their capabilities while revealing crucial details about their command structure and operational methodology. Through various reflective surfaces, he tracked movement patterns throughout Shadow Creek as the town's defensive network responded to this first direct contact. Every resident played their part in maintaining normal evening activities while preparing for developments that would test years of careful planning and preparation. The encounter in the tea house had initiated a complex dance of observation and counter-observation, with both sides gathering intelligence while maintaining their respective covers. Shadow Creek's carefully crafted appearance of vulnerability was about to be tested against the syndicate's professional military expertise in ways that would demonstrate why Marcus's reputation in certain circles had commanded such respect and fear. As night settled more firmly over Shadow Creek, Marcus began the subtle process of transitioning the tea house from its daytime configuration. Each movement served multiple purposes, securing the premises while activating carefully concealed defensive measures that transformed the seemingly peaceful establishment into a sophisticated tactical position. The wooden panels lining the walls, appearing to be simple decorative elements, contained hidden compartments accessible through precisely engineered pressure points. Within these spaces lay an arsenal that would have impressed military commanders. Specialized equipment, gathered from across the globe during Marcus's former career, each item chosen for both effectiveness and discretion. "Time for evening preparations," he announced quietly, the phrase triggering a carefully choreographed sequence throughout the town. Elizabeth Foster gathered her books with deliberate care, her movement allowing her to activate specific mechanisms. Concealed within the tea house's reading nook, the apparently ornate bookshelf could transform into a fortified position within moments. Dr. Harrison's medical bag, resting innocuously beside his chair, contained more than standard supplies. Each instrument had been carefully modified to serve multiple purposes: surgical tools that could disable locks, medicines that could create tactical advantages, bandages treated with compounds that could tip the balance in close-quarter confrontations. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus observed Sarah Watson implementing the telegraph office's evening security measures. The building's innocent appearance masked a sophisticated communication hub, its equipment modified to intercept and decode the syndicate's military signals while maintaining perfect deniability. Robert Smith's forge underwent its own transformation as darkness fell. The seemingly ordinary workshop contained forge-worked items that could rapidly convert from peaceful tools to effective weapons. His evening cleaning routine actually positioned specific items for quick access while appearing completely innocent. To observers, the storm's intensity provided cover for Clara Bennett to activate the boarding house's defensive features. Each room had been carefully modified over years: furniture that could provide cover, walls that contained hidden passages, windows whose decorative shutters concealed reinforced firing positions. Sheriff Collins's evening patrol triggered another sequence of preparations throughout Shadow Creek. The jail's apparently standard security features included sophisticated modifications based on Marcus's knowledge of both containment and escape techniques. Every cell could serve as either a secure holding or defensive position depending on circumstances. Inside the bank, James Chen's closing routine implemented multiple layers of security far beyond standard measures. The vault's visible locks were merely the surface of a complex system designed to protect not just valuables, but also to serve as a fallback position if needed. The building's basement contained emergency supplies and equipment hidden beneath ordinary storage. Kate Morrison's piano playing masked the sound of the saloon's evening transformation. The establishment's renovations, overseen by Jacob Stone, had incorporated defensive features that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. Support beams doubled as cover positions, decorative railings concealed tactical advantages, and the entire structure could be controlled through carefully planned choke points. Marcus's hands moved with practiced precision as he activated the tea house's more sophisticated defensive measures. The building's design incorporated principles learned from master architects across Asia and Europe, seemingly ordinary features that could transform the space's tactical dynamics within moments. Tommy, Watson's evening paper route, provided cover for final position checks throughout town. The boy's naturally observant nature had been honed through careful training, his innocent appearance allowing him to move freely while gathering crucial intelligence about the syndicate's deployments. The town's lighting system, appearing to be simple coal oil lamps, had been carefully modified under Marcus's direction. Each light source could be controlled independently, allowing for sophisticated manipulation of shadow and visibility that would prove decisive in nighttime operations. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked the activation of Shadow Creek's defensive network. The town's preparation went far beyond simple fortification. Each element had been designed to maintain perfect deniability while providing significant tactical advantages when properly employed. Martha Chen's supply wagon, making its final delivery of the evening, contained more than routine goods. The vehicle had been modified to serve as a mobile supply cache, its seemingly ordinary construction concealing compartments filled with crucial resources that could be quickly accessed. If needed, the livery stable's evening routine included its own defensive preparations. Under the guise of normal horse care, specific animals were positioned for quick deployment, while others were arranged to create natural barriers. The building's architecture included features that could rapidly transform it from stable to stronghold. Dr. Harrison's clinic, already prepared for potential casualties, contained additional layers of readiness invisible to casual observation. The basement's apparent storage area concealed a fully equipped medical facility, while ordinary cabinets contained supplies chosen for both healing and tactical application. The general store's closing routine implemented its own defensive measures. Years of careful modification had created a structure that could serve as both supply cache and tactical position. Inventory arrangements that appeared to follow standard retail practice actually positioned crucial resources for quick access while maintaining perfect deniability. Elizabeth Foster's library, seemingly the most peaceful building in town, contained its own sophisticated defensive features. The book collection included volumes modified to conceal crucial equipment, while the building's renovation had incorporated architectural elements that could prove decisive in the coming confrontation. Through the tea house windows, Marcus observed the Syndicate's reaction to Shadow Creek's evening transformation. Their military training made them sensitive to changes in the tactical environment, yet the town's careful preparation appeared completely natural to professional observation. Sarah Watson's position at the telegraph office provided perfect cover for coordinating Shadow Creek's defensive network. The building's apparent vulnerability masked sophisticated communication systems that could maintain coordination throughout. The town, while appearing completely ordinary to military observation, the rain's steady drumming covered the sound of final preparations throughout Shadow Creek. Marcus's years of experience in covert operations had been applied to creating a defensive system that remained invisible until activated, each element appearing completely innocent, while serving crucial tactical purposes. Robert Smith's forge work provided acoustic cover for other activities throughout town. The rhythmic hammering masked the sound of defensive positions being finalized, while the workshop's ordinary appearance concealed an operations center capable of maintaining Shadow Creek's security through extended confrontation. The storm's intensity increased as Marcus completed the tea house's evening transformation. Years of careful planning and preparation had created a defensive network that would soon demonstrate why his reputation in certain circles had commanded such respect. Shadow Creek's apparent vulnerability masked a sophisticated system designed specifically to counter military-style operations. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked the final stages of preparation throughout town. Every resident understood their role in the coming confrontation, their ordinary evening routines concealing careful coordination and tactical readiness. The Syndicate's military expertise was about to be tested against a defensive system designed by someone who had mastered the art of invisible warfare. The town church's evening bell rang, its familiar tone carrying coded information about defensive readiness throughout Shadow Creek. Reverend Miles had integrated sophisticated signaling systems into seemingly religious routines, the chapel's architecture concealing features that would prove crucial in the coming conflict. Young Alice Bennett, Clara's daughter, moved through her evening chores at the boarding house with practiced efficiency. Her innocent appearance masked years of careful training in observation and coordination. Each task she performed, filling lamps, turning down beds, delivering evening tea, positioned specific resources while maintaining perfect cover of normal routine. The town's water tower, appearing to be simple frontier infrastructure, had been carefully modified under Marcus's direction. Its position provided both tactical advantage and emergency resource, while concealed mechanisms could rapidly alter water flow throughout Shadow Creek to create strategic advantages or obstacles as needed. Marcus began preparing a special blend of tea, the process allowing him to verify specific defensive positions through various reflective surfaces. The tea house's porcelain collection included pieces chosen for both beauty and tactical utility. Cups that could shatter in precise patterns, pots weighted for specific purposes, trays that could serve as improvised shields. Dr. Harrison's presence in the tea house carried additional significance as evening preparations continued. His medical expertise had been integrated into Shadow Creek's defensive strategy in sophisticated ways. Treatment protocols designed to maintain combat effectiveness, supply caches positioned to support extended operations, recovery plans that wouldn't compromise security. The Undertaker's establishment, perhaps the least visited business in normal times, contained its own careful preparations. Howard Grant's professional equipment had been modified to serve multiple purposes, while the building's construction incorporated features that could prove decisive in controlling specific approaches to the town center. Through the storm's veil, Marcus noted Martha Chen's final delivery route. Her wagon's apparent commercial purpose masked a sophisticated supply network that could maintain Shadow Creek's operational capability through extended conflict. Each delivery point had been chosen for both tactical significance and perfect deniability. The town's drainage system, appearing to follow standard frontier design, had been carefully engineered to provide both tactical advantages and emergency routes. Maintenance access points that seemed ordinary actually connected to a network of passages that could prove crucial for movement during conflict. Clara Bennett's boarding house kitchen underwent its own evening transformation. The seemingly ordinary space contained equipment chosen for both civilian use and tactical application, while the pantry's organization concealed supply caches that could support extended operations without compromising apparent normalcy. Sheriff Collins's deputy, James Miller, began his evening patrol with careful attention to specific routes. His law enforcement role provided perfect cover for implementing final security measures throughout Shadow Creek, each interaction with townspeople carrying coded confirmation of defensive readiness. The town stables completed their evening routine under Samuel Wright's direction. The experienced hostler had integrated sophisticated defensive measures into normal horse care procedures, positioning animals and equipment to provide both tactical advantage and rapid response capability when needed. Marcus's attention caught subtle movement near the bank. Catherine Chen, the manager's daughter, completing her evening duties. Her seemingly innocent activities included verification of specific security measures that went far beyond standard banking practice, each task coordinated with Shadow Creek's broader defensive strategy. The general store's inventory underwent final evening organization under Thomas Burke's supervision. Years of careful planning had created storage arrangements that appeared to follow standard retail practice while actually positioning crucial supplies for quick access during conflict. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus observed Sarah Watson implementing final evening measures at the telegraph office. The building's communication equipment had been modified to provide both tactical coordination and perfect deniability, while its position in town offered crucial advantages for monitoring movement patterns. Robert Smith's forge work continued to provide acoustic cover as darkness settled more firmly over Shadow Creek. The workshop's apparent industrial purpose masked sophisticated manufacturing capabilities that could maintain the town's tactical equipment through extended operations. Elizabeth Foster's final library preparations included subtle verification of specific defensive positions. The building's book collection concealed crucial resources within modified volumes, while its architecture incorporated features designed to control approaches to the town center. The storm's intensity grew as Marcus completed the tea house's evening transformation. Shadow Creek's apparent vulnerability masked years of careful preparation, each element of the town's defensive network designed to remain invisible until activated. The Syndicate's military expertise was about to encounter a system specifically crafted to counter conventional tactical doctrine. As night settled over the valley, Marcus observed the final stages of preparation throughout town. Every resident understood their role in the coming confrontation, their ordinary evening routines concealing sophisticated coordination and tactical readiness. Shadow Creek was about demonstrating why Marcus Chen's reputation had once commanded such respect in certain circles, and why his choice to become a protector had made him even more formidable than he had been as an assassin. Sarah Watson hadn't always been the confident telegraph operator who now served as Shadow Creek's communication hub. 5 years ago, she'd arrived as a widow with a young son, seeking nothing more than a quiet place to rebuild their lives. The subtle grace with which Marcus Chen had offered them protection, never charity, always opportunity, had transformed her grief into purpose. Through the rain-streaked windows of her telegraph office, she monitored the syndicate's attempts to establish communication with their outlying forces. Her fingers, once trained for simple message transmission, now employed sophisticated coding, techniques learned during countless evening sessions at the tea house. Each incoming message was intercepted, analyzed, and subtly altered before being passed along. "Fascinating weather patterns," Tommy commented as he completed his evening paper route, his young voice carrying layered meaning. Sarah smiled at her. The son's growth over the years, from a frightened boy seeking safety to a crucial member of Shadow Creek's intelligence network. Marcus had recognized something in Tommy that others had missed, nurturing the boy's natural talent for observation and memory. Across the street, Dr. James Harrison's evening rounds carried deeper purpose than mere medical attention. His journey from battlefield surgeon to town doctor had left him with intimate knowledge of both healing and harm. Marcus had helped him transform that knowledge into something more. The ability to read bodies for tactical information, to understand how injury and recovery could influence combat dynamics. "Evening, Doctor," Clara Bennett called from her boarding house porch, her widow's weeds concealing more than personal loss. Like Sarah, she had come to Shadow Creek seeking refuge. Unlike many, she had recognized something familiar in Marcus's carefully maintained cover, one survivor recognizing another. Her boarding house had become more than shelter, its position and operations crucial to town security. Elizabeth Foster's path to Shadow Creek had been more deliberate. The librarian's passion for knowledge masked years of experience in information analysis. Her ability to process and correlate data made her invaluable in monitoring regional patterns, tracking movement of potential threats, and maintaining the town's intelligence archives. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus observed how each of these individuals had grown into their roles. Robert Smith, the blacksmith, had transformed from a skilled craftsman into something more complex. His forge work now incorporated techniques learned from Marcus's global experience, creating tools that served multiple purposes while maintaining perfect deniability. Kate Morrison's elegant figure at the saloon's piano belied her crucial role in Shadow Creek's defense network. Her musical training, once limited to entertainment, now employed sophisticated coding through melody and rhythm. Each piece she played carried specific information about movement and positioning within the establishment, while her social position provided perfect cover for gathering intelligence. Sheriff Collins passed by the telegraph office, his law enforcement experience enhanced by years of careful coordination with Marcus's security system. The former infantry officer had recognized the value of subtle preparation over obvious strength, his military background adapting to support Shadow Creek's unique defensive strategy. Young Alice Bennett's evening activities at the boarding house demonstrated how thoroughly the next generation had been integrated into town security. Clara's daughter had absorbed lessons in observation and coordination naturally, her innocent appearance providing perfect cover for monitoring visitor patterns and maintaining communication links throughout town. Martha Chen's trading network had evolved far beyond simple commerce. Her regular routes provided crucial intelligence about regional movements, while her supply operations maintained Shadow Creek's resource independence. Each delivery and exchange carried additional purpose, supporting the town's preparedness while appearing completely ordinary. James Chen, the bank manager, completed his evening security checks with precise attention to detail. His financial expertise had been enhanced by Marcus's training, creating systems that protected more than mere money. The bank's position in town life provided perfect cover for coordinating various security measures while maintaining normal operations. Through the tea house windows, Marcus noted how the storm's intensity affected visibility patterns throughout. In town, Sarah Watson's careful manipulation of telegraph traffic, Tommy's precise observation routes, Dr. Harrison's tactical assessment during medical rounds. Each person's role had been crafted to complement their natural abilities while serving town security. Reverend Miles continued his evening rounds, his religious duties providing perfect cover for security coordination. The church's position in community life allowed for regular gatherings that could serve multiple purposes, while its architecture had been carefully modified to support town defense when necessary. Catherine Chen's movements through the bank's evening routine demonstrated the integration of younger residents into Shadow Creek's security network. Her natural grace in maintaining apparent normalcy while implementing sophisticated protocols showed how thoroughly the next generation had absorbed their training. Howard Grant, the undertaker, maintained his solemn duties while supporting crucial aspects of town security. His profession provided perfect cover for certain preparations, while his establishment's position offered tactical advantages that could prove decisive in the coming confrontation. Samuel Wright's management of the livery stable incorporated lessons learned from Marcus's global experience. Each aspect of horse care and stable operation had been refined to support rapid response capability while maintaining complete deniability. His expertise in animal behavior provided additional tactical advantages in monitoring approach routes to town. Thomas Burke's operation of the general store demonstrated how thoroughly civilian activities had been integrated into town security. His inventory management combined normal retail practice with sophisticated resource positioning, while his position in town life provided perfect cover for coordinating various security measures. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus observed the subtle coordination between these individuals. Years of careful training had created a network where each person's role supported the others, their ordinary activities concealing sophisticated security measures that would prove crucial. In the coming conflict, Sarah Watson's evening check of telegraph lines carried additional significance as the situation developed. Her ability to monitor and control information flow had become central to town security, while her position provided perfect cover for coordinating various defensive measures. Tommy's natural talent for observation had been enhanced by years of careful training, his paper route providing ideal cover for regular security sweeps. Dr. Harrison's medical expertise had evolved to support both healing and tactical advantage. His understanding of how injury and recovery affected combat dynamics provided crucial insights for town defense, while his position allowed regular monitoring of visitor health patterns that could reveal tactical information. Clara Bennett's management of the boarding house demonstrated how thoroughly civilian operations had been integrated into town security. Each aspect of her establishment's routine supported defensive preparation while maintaining perfect deniability. Her ability to monitor visitor patterns while providing comfortable accommodation made her position crucial to town security. Elizabeth Foster's operation of the library combined intellectual pursuit with sophisticated intelligence gathering. Her expertise in information analysis had been enhanced by years of careful coordination with Marcus's security system, while her position provided perfect cover for monitoring regional patterns and maintaining crucial archives. The storm's intensity increased as night settled more firmly over Shadow Creek. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus observed how each resident's role had evolved to support town security while maintaining complete normalcy. The syndicate's military expertise was about to encounter a defensive network where every person's ordinary activities concealed extraordinary preparation. The first shot came not as thunder, but as a sharp crack through the storm's rhythm, a warning round from one of the syndicate's scouts that shattered the false peace of Shadow Creek's evening. Through the tea house windows, Marcus observed the subtle shift in town dynamics as years of preparation transformed into coordinated response. Captain Drake's voice carried across the rain-slicked street, military precision giving way to frustration. "Chen, your position's compromised. 3 sides covered, backup approaching. Let's handle this professionally." The intelligence officer's attempt at tactical negotiation revealed crucial details about the syndicate's deployment patterns. Marcus continued his precise movements behind the tea house counter, each gesture now serving specific tactical purposes. "Interesting choice of approach, Captain," he responded, his voice carrying just far enough to be heard through the storm. "Though perhaps we should discuss your definition of professional." Through various reflective surfaces, he tracked multiple targeting lasers searching for clean shots through the tea house windows. The syndicate's military training showed in their positioning, but their adherence to standard doctrine made their movements predictable to someone with appropriate experience. Sarah Watson's telegraph key began a subtle rhythm beneath the storm's cover, not the usual Morse code, but something far more sophisticated. Her fingers transmitted crucial updates about the syndicate's movements, while appearing to send routine weather notifications to neighboring communities. Lieutenant Walsh's voice joined the negotiation, his tone carrying military authority earned through battlefield experience. "Final warning, Chen. We have your exits covered. Reinforcements moving into position. Don't escalate this beyond necessity." His choice of words confirmed Marcus's assessment of their tactical doctrine. Dr. Harrison's medical bag clicked softly as he made subtle adjustments to its contents. Each instrument had been carefully chosen for multiple applications, their medical purpose providing perfect cover for more tactical capabilities. "Fascinating approach to community relations," he commented quietly, his position allowing observation of crucial angles. The syndicate's men had established what they believed to be superior firing positions, their military training evident in their coverage patterns. What they couldn't know was how Shadow Creek's architecture had been specifically modified to counter such standard tactical deployment. Tommy Watson's paper route took him past key positions throughout town, his young voice carrying coded updates about the syndicate's movements. "Evening edition, Dr. Harrison. Interesting weather report today." Each word conveyed specific information while maintaining perfect cover of innocent interaction. Elizabeth Foster's book closed with careful precision as she adjusted her position in the tea house. "Remarkable interpretation of tactical doctrine," she observed quietly, her academic tone masking detailed analysis of the syndicate's deployment patterns. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the storm's background, carrying the weight of command that had once directed military operations. "Enough games, Chen. Your reputation suggests you understand the situation's implications. Let's resolve this efficiently." The reference to reputation confirmed certain suspicions about their intelligence gathering. Marcus's hands maintained their steady rhythm of tea preparation, while his mind processed multiple layers of tactical information. The syndicate's approach followed predictable military patterns, their training making them formidable, but also creating exploitable gaps in their tactical awareness. Through the copper kettle's reflection, he noted Sarah Watson implementing sophisticated countermeasures at the telegraph office. Her apparently routine message traffic actually coordinated complex defensive responses throughout Shadow Creek while maintaining perfect deniability. Kate Morrison's piano music shifted to a complex piece, requiring intense concentration, the melody carrying coded information about movement within the saloon. Each note conveyed specific updates about the syndicate's command post, while appearing to simply provide evening entertainment. Sheriff Collins's voice carried measured authority as he approached the developing confrontation. "Gentlemen, perhaps we should discuss this situation more appropriately." His law enforcement position provided perfect cover for implementing certain aspects of Shadow Creek's defensive strategy. Clara Bennett's boarding house underwent subtle transformation as the situation developed. Apparently innocent adjustments to furniture and lighting created specific tactical advantages while maintaining complete deniability. Her position allowed crucial observation of the syndicate's deployment patterns. Robert Smith's forge work continued its steady rhythm, the sound masking more sophisticated preparations throughout town. His apparently routine activities concealed coordination of various defensive measures while providing acoustic cover for crucial movements. Marcus noted subtle shifts in the syndicate's positioning as they attempted to establish tactical superiority. Their military training made them dangerous opponents, but their adherence to standard doctrine created predictable patterns that Shadow Creek's defensive network had been specifically designed to counter. Martha Chen's supply wagon made one final pass through town, its routine delivery pattern concealing sophisticated resupply operations. Each stop provided crucial updates about the syndicate's movements, while maintaining perfect cover of normal commercial activity. James Chen's bank underwent its own careful transformation as the situation escalated. Years of preparation had created defensive capabilities that went far beyond standard security measures, while maintaining complete appearance of normal financial operations. The storm's intensity provided perfect cover for Shadow Creek's defensive network to activate various pre-planned responses. Each resident's role had been carefully choreographed to appear completely natural while serving specific tactical purposes. Through the tea house windows, Marcus tracked multiple layers of activity as the confrontation developed. The syndicate's military expertise was about to encounter a defensive system specifically designed to counter conventional tactical doctrine, each element of Shadow Creek's preparation crafted to exploit predictable patterns in military operations. Catherine Chen's movement through the bank's evening routine carried additional significance as the situation escalated. Her apparently innocent activities implemented sophisticated security protocols while maintaining perfect cover of normal banking operations. Howard Grant's establishment underwent subtle adjustments that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. The undertaker's professional equipment had been modified to serve multiple purposes while maintaining complete deniability. Samuel Wright's management of the livery stable incorporated crucial elements of Shadow Creek's defensive strategy. His expertise in animal behavior provided tactical advantages in monitoring and controlling various approach routes to town. Thomas Burke's general store completed its evening transformation with careful attention to detail. Years of preparation had created defensive capabilities that went far beyond normal retail security while maintaining the perfect appearance of ordinary commerce. Lightning split the storm-darkened sky as an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows. Victor Crane, a name Marcus hadn't encountered in 15 years. The man's presence complicated everything, his appearance suggesting layers of complexity beyond the syndicate's apparent military operation. Through the tea-house windows, Marcus observed how Crane's arrival shifted the tactical dynamics of the entire situation. Fascinating development, Crane's cultured voice carried across the rain-swept street. The ghost of Shanghai, reduced to serving tea in a frontier town. His knowledge of Marcus's former identity suggested connections to operations that should have remained buried in the past. The silver-handled cane he carried concealed sophisticated weapons technology that Marcus recognized from clandestine European markets. Colonel Harrison's reaction revealed another layer of complexity. The slight tensing of his shoulders, indicating this development hadn't been part of the syndicate's original plan. "Mr. Crane," he acknowledged, military discipline masking obvious discomfort. "Your presence wasn't expected until tomorrow's operation." Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked subtle shifts in the tactical situation. Crane's arrival had introduced new variables that threatened to destabilize Shadow Creek's carefully prepared defenses. The man's reputation in certain circles suggested capabilities far beyond ordinary military expertise. Sarah Watson's telegraph key maintained its steady rhythm, but her fingers now transmitted more urgent updates throughout town. Her experience in coding allowed her to adapt the message patterns to account for this new threat while maintaining perfect cover of routine communication. "Plans change, Colonel," Crane replied, his movement through the rain displaying the liquid grace of someone trained in more exotic combat arts. "Especially when certain interests discover the true identity of a simple tea-house proprietor." His words carried layers of meaning that suggested dangerous knowledge of Marcus's past operations. Dr. Harrison's medical bag clicked softly as he made careful adjustments to its contents. The doctor's battlefield experience allowed him to recognize how Crane's presence altered the tactical equation. "Remarkable coincidence," he commented quietly, his position allowing observation of crucial angles while maintaining cover of medical concern. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus noted Katie Morrison's subtle shift in piano melody, the complex rhythm now carrying coded warnings about additional figures moving into position around town. Her musical training allowed her to adapt the signaling system while maintaining the perfect appearance of evening entertainment. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Chen," Crane continued, his cane tapping a precise pattern on the rain-slicked boardwalk. "Or should I say, Master Wei, the efficiency of your work in Marseille particularly impressed certain observers." The reference to that operation suggested connections to organizations that should have lost Marcus's trail years ago. Elizabeth Foster's book closed with deliberate care as she processed this new information. Her expertise in analysis allowed her to recognize dangerous patterns in Crane's appearance and timing. "Fascinating implications," she murmured, her academic tone masking tactical assessment of this new threat. Sheriff Collins maintained his position with professional calm, though his military experience allowed him to recognize how Crane's arrival complicated their defensive strategy. "Evening, sir," he acknowledged, law enforcement authority providing cover for more tactical observations. "You're a long way from your usual territory." Clara Bennett's boarding house underwent subtle adjustments to account for this new threat. Her experience in observation allowed her to recognize dangerous capabilities in Crane's movement patterns. The widow's apparent focus on evening routine masked implementation of additional security measures. Through the storm's veil, Marcus noted how the syndicate's men responded to Crane's presence, their military training creating tension with whatever authority he represented. Captain Drake's positioning suggested particular discomfort with this development, his intelligence background perhaps providing insight into Crane's true nature. "Your disappearance caused quite a stir in certain circles," Crane observed, his cane marking precise points on the wet boardwalk. "Some believed you were dead, others retired, a few suggested you'd found a higher purpose." His knowledge of Marcus's past suggested access to information that should have remained secure. Tommy Watson's paper route took him past key positions with careful attention to new developments. The boy's natural talent for observation allowed him to adapt his intelligence gathering while maintaining perfect cover of innocent activity. "Evening edition, Mr. Crane." His young voice carried coded updates about additional movement throughout town. Robert Smith's forge work maintained its steady rhythm, though the pattern now transmitted more urgent warnings through Shadow Creek's defensive network. His expertise in crafting allowed him to adapt the signaling system while maintaining the appearance of routine industrial activity. Martha Chen's supply wagon made necessary adjustments to its delivery pattern, accounting for new tactical considerations while maintaining cover of normal commerce. Her experience in coordination allowed her to adapt resource distribution without drawing attention to these changes. James Chen's bank underwent additional security modifications as the situation developed. His financial expertise provided perfect cover for implementing sophisticated countermeasures while maintaining the appearance of routine business operations. Lightning flashed again as Crane moved closer to the tea house, his presence suggesting capabilities that threatened to destabilize Shadow Creek's carefully prepared defenses. "Your work always showed remarkable attention to detail," he commented, studying the building's apparently innocent facade. "One wonders what other masterpieces you've created here." Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked multiple layers of response to this new threat. Shadow Creek's defensive network had been designed to counter military operations, but Crane's arrival introduced complexities that required immediate adaptation. Catherine Chen's movements through the bank took on additional significance as she implemented more sophisticated security protocols. Her natural grace allowed her to maintain perfect cover of routine activity while adapting to these new tactical considerations. Howard Grant's establishment underwent careful adjustments to account for this unexpected development. The undertaker's professional equipment had been modified to serve multiple purposes, each now requiring adaptation to counter whatever capabilities Crane might represent. Samuel Wright's management of the livery stable incorporated new defensive considerations while maintaining appearance of normal operations. His expertise in animal behavior provided crucial advantages in monitoring additional movement patterns throughout town. Thomas Burke's general store completed more sophisticated security modifications as the situation developed. Years of preparation had created defensive capabilities that could adapt to various threats while maintaining perfect cover of ordinary commerce. The storm's intensity grew as Crane's presence forced Shadow Creek's defensive network to adapt its carefully prepared responses. Each resident's role required immediate adjustment to account for capabilities far beyond ordinary military expertise, while maintaining complete appearance of normal evening activities. Through the tea house windows, Marcus observed how this new development affected multiple layers of tactical consideration. Crane's arrival suggested a connection to past operations that should have remained buried, while his presence threatened to destabilize carefully prepared defenses designed to counter conventional military threats. Sarah Watson's position at the telegraph office took on crucial significance as she coordinated more complex defensive responses throughout town. Her experience in coding allowed her to adapt communication patterns while maintaining perfect cover of routine message traffic. Dr. Harrison's medical expertise provided additional tactical advantages as he assessed this new threat's capabilities. His battlefield experience allowed him to recognize dangerous patterns in Crane's movement, while maintaining cover of professional medical concern. The storm's intensity provided perfect cover for Shadow Creek's defensive network to implement more sophisticated responses to this unexpected development. Each element of town security required immediate adaptation to counter capabilities far beyond ordinary military expertise. Lightning illuminated Shadow Creek as Crane produced a small leather folio from his coat. "Your departure from Shanghai left certain matters unresolved," he announced, his cultured voice carrying over the storm. "The Emperor's seal, for instance. Fascinating how it disappeared the same night as our mutual friend, Administrator Chen." Marcus's hands maintained their steady rhythm of tea preparation, though his mind processed the implications of this revelation. Administrator Chen's death had been attributed to natural causes, the seal's disappearance blamed on common thieves. That operation should have remained buried in the past, its details known only to a select few. "The seal was quite remarkable," Crane continued, paging through his folio with deliberate care. "Jade and gold, dating to the Ming dynasty. Its disappearance caused quite a stir in certain circles. His knowledge suggested connections to organizations that should have lost interest years ago. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus noted Colonel Harrison's reaction to this exchange. The military commander's subtle shift in posture revealed growing uncertainty about his role in whatever game Crane was playing. "This wasn't part of our arrangement," Harrison stated, professional discipline barely masking his concern. Sarah. Watson's telegraph key maintained its steady rhythm, though her fingers now transmitted more complex updates throughout town. The mention of Shanghai carried specific significance, a code word established years ago for situations requiring activation of Shadow Creek's most sophisticated defensive protocols. "Arrangements change, Colonel," Crane replied, his silver-handled cane marking precise points on the wet boardwalk. "Especially when certain interests discover connections between a simple tea-house proprietor and unsolved mysteries spanning 3 continents. Dr. Harrison's medical bag clicked softly as he made careful adjustments to its contents. The doctor's experience allowed him to recognize dangerous implications in Crane's revelations while maintaining cover of professional concern. "Remarkable coincidence," he commented quietly, his position allowing observation of crucial angles. Through the copper kettle's reflection, Marcus tracked subtle movement throughout town as Shadow Creek's defensive network responded to these new revelations. Each resident's role required immediate adaptation to account for implications far beyond the syndicate's apparent military operation. "The administrator's death was particularly elegant," Crane observed, studying a specific page in his folio. "Heart failure induced by an undetectable compound, a signature technique that attracted considerable attention." His knowledge of those details suggested access to information that should have remained secure. Elizabeth Foster's book closed with deliberate precision as she processed these revelations. Her expertise in analysis allowed her to recognize dangerous patterns connecting past operations to present threats. "Fascinating methodology," she murmured, her academic tone masking tactical assessment of this new information. Sheriff Collins maintained his position with professional calm, though his military experience allowed him to recognize how these revelations complicated their defensive strategy. "Quite a story," he acknowledged, law enforcement authority providing cover for more tactical observations. Clara Bennett's boarding house underwent subtle adjustments to account for implications revealed by Crane's presence. Her experience in observation allowed her to recognize dangerous capabilities suggested by his knowledge of past operations. The widow's apparent focus on evening routine masked implementation of additional security measures. Your work always showed remarkable creativity, Crane continued, his cane tapping a precise pattern that Marcus recognized from clandestine operations in Europe. The businessman in Madrid, the diplomat in Vienna, each appeared to be natural causes, yet certain patterns emerged. Tommy Watson's paper route took him past key positions with careful attention to new developments. The boy's natural talent for observation allowed him to adapt his intelligence gathering while maintaining perfect cover of innocent activity. Evening edition. His young voice carried coded updates about response to these revelations. Robert Smith's forge work maintained its steady rhythm, though the pattern now transmitted more urgent warnings through Shadow Creek's defensive network. His expertise in crafting allowed him to adapt the signaling system while maintaining the appearance of routine industrial activity. Martha Chen's supply wagon made necessary adjustments to its delivery pattern, accounting for tactical implications revealed by Crane's presence. Her experience in coordination allowed her to adapt resource distribution without drawing attention. To these changes, the Phantom Department took particular interest in your methods, Crane revealed, studying Marcus through the rain. An organization dedicated to analyzing patterns in seemingly unrelated events. Your work provided fascinating case studies in the art of invisible warfare. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked multiple layers of response to these revelations. Shadow Creek's defensive network had been designed to counter various threats, but Crane's knowledge of past operations introduced complexities requiring immediate adaptation. Catherine Chen's movements through the bank took on additional significance as she implemented more sophisticated security protocols. Her natural grace allowed her to maintain perfect cover of routine activity while adapting to implications revealed by Crane's presence. Howard Grant's establishment underwent careful adjustments to account for these new revelations. The Undertaker's professional equipment had been modified to serve multiple purposes, each now requiring adaptation to counter capabilities suggested by Crane's knowledge. Your disappearance was particularly intriguing, Crane continued, his words carrying dangerous implications. A master operative choosing exile in a frontier town, unless, perhaps, this apparent retirement serves a higher purpose. Samuel Wright's management of the livery stable incorporated new defensive considerations while maintaining appearance of normal operations. His expertise in animal behavior provided crucial advantages in monitoring additional movement patterns throughout town. Thomas Burke's general store completed more sophisticated security modifications as implications of Crane's revelations became clear. Years of preparation had created defensive capabilities that could adapt to various threats while maintaining perfect cover of ordinary commerce. Lightning flashed again as Crane produced another document from his folio. The Emperor's seal resurfaced. Briefly in London, he announced, studying Marcus's reaction. Then Paris, Vienna, finally disappearing completely. Its path coincided with a series of remarkable coincidences affecting certain political developments. Through the tea-house windows, Marcus observed how these revelations affected multiple layers of tactical consideration. Crane's knowledge of past operations suggested capabilities far beyond ordinary intelligence gathering, while his presence threatened to expose carefully hidden connections between seemingly unrelated events. Sarah Watson's position at the telegraph office took on crucial significance as she coordinated more complex defensive responses throughout town. Her experience in coding allowed her to adapt communication patterns while maintaining perfect cover of routine message traffic. Your choice of location proves particularly interesting, Crane observed, his cane marking precise points that corresponded to tactical positions throughout town. A quiet community perfectly positioned to monitor certain activities across 3 territories. One might almost suspect broader strategic considerations. Dr. Harrison's medical expertise provided additional tactical advantages as he assessed implications of these revelations. His battlefield experience allowed him to recognize dangerous patterns in Crane's knowledge, while maintaining cover of professional medical concern. The storm's intensity provided perfect cover for Shadow Creek's defensive network to implement more sophisticated responses to these unexpected revelations. Each element of town security required immediate adaptation to counter implications far beyond ordinary tactical considerations. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked how these revelations affected multiple aspects of the developing situation. Crane's knowledge of past operations threatened to expose carefully hidden connections, while his presence suggested capabilities that could destabilize Shadow Creek's carefully prepared defenses. Thunder rolled across Shadow Creek as Marcus made a subtle adjustment to his teacup's position, a gesture that initiated carefully planned sequences throughout town. "Interesting theory, Mr. Crane," he responded, his voice carrying precise modulation that triggered specific responses in Shadow Creek's defensive network. "Though perhaps we should discuss the real reason for your presence here." Through the copper kettle's reflection, he noted Sarah Watson's immediate response to his signal. The telegraph operator's fingers moved across her key in complex patterns, transmitting coded instructions that would activate Shadow Creek's most sophisticated defensive measures. The Phantom Department's interest extends beyond past operations. Crane revealed, his silver-handled cane marking precise points that corresponded to hidden defensive positions throughout town. "Your transformation of this community proves particularly intriguing, a masterpiece of invisible infrastructure." Dr. Harrison rose slowly from his seat, his movement appearing natural while actually positioning him to access specific equipment hidden within the tea house's structure. "Remarkable assessment," he commented, the medical bag clicking softly as he made final adjustments to its contents. Colonel Harrison's military training allowed him to recognize subtle shifts in the tactical situation, though he couldn't identify their specific nature. "This goes beyond our original agreement," he stated, professional discipline masking growing concern about his position between 2 master operatives. "Original agreements rarely survive contact with deeper truths," Crane responded, producing another document from his folio. "For instance, the curious pattern of political developments following your apparent retirement. Regional stability increases through seemingly natural events." Elizabeth Foster's careful observation allowed her to recognize crucial patterns in Crane's revelations. "Fascinating correlation," she murmured, her academic tone masking transmission of specific intelligence through Shadow Creek's communication network. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked multiple layers of response as the town's defensive network shifted to its most sophisticated configuration. Each resident's role had been carefully choreographed for this contingency, their actions appearing completely natural while serving precise tactical purposes. "The Emperor's seal represented more than mere antiquity," Crane continued, studying Marcus's reaction. "Its disappearance altered delicate political balances, creating opportunities for certain interests to establish new patterns of influence. Tommy Watson's paper route took him past final positions with careful attention to developing situations. The boy's natural talent for observation allowed him to coordinate last-minute adjustments while maintaining perfect cover of innocent activity." "Extra edition!" His voice carried coded confirmation of defensive readiness. Robert Smith's forge. Work shifted to specific rhythms that transmitted crucial updates throughout town. His expertise in crafting allowed him to coordinate final preparations while maintaining the appearance of routine industrial activity. Shadow Creek's position proves tactically significant, Crane observed, his cane tapping precise patterns that Marcus recognized from clandestine operations. Perfect observation point for monitoring movement patterns across 3 territories. One might almost suspect strategic planning. Martha Chen's supply wagon completed final adjustments to its delivery pattern, ensuring crucial resources were positioned exactly where they would be needed. Her experience in coordination allowed her to complete these preparations without drawing attention to their tactical significance. Clara Bennett's boarding house underwent its final transformation as the situation developed. The widow's experience in observation allowed her to coordinate sophisticated defensive measures while maintaining perfect cover of routine evening activities. Your methods always showed remarkable subtlety, Crane continued, studying the tea house's apparently innocent facade. Creating influence through carefully crafted circumstances rather than direct action. One wonders what masterpiece you've created here. Sheriff Collins maintained his position with professional calm, though his military experience allowed him to recognize crucial patterns in the developing situation. Interesting perspective, he acknowledged. Law enforcement authority, providing cover for final tactical preparations. Catherine Chen's movements through the bank completed sophisticated security protocols that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. Her natural grace allowed her to coordinate final defensive measures while maintaining perfect cover of routine activity. The Phantom Department's analysis suggests broader implications, Crane revealed, his words carrying dangerous weight. A master operative establishing perfect cover while creating sophisticated infrastructure for unknown purposes. Most intriguing. Howard Grant's establishment completed final adjustments to its tactical configuration. The Undertaker's professional equipment had been modified to serve multiple purposes, each now positioned for maximum effectiveness in the coming confrontation. Samuel Wright's management of the livery stable incorporated final defensive preparations, while maintaining appearance of normal operations. His expertise in animal behavior provided crucial advantages in coordinating movement patterns throughout town. Lightning split the sky as Crane produced a final document from his folio. Your work in Shanghai demonstrated remarkable vision, he observed, studying Marcus through the rain, creating circumstances that appeared natural while serving very specific purposes. One wonders what circumstances you've created here. Through the tea house windows, Marcus tracked multiple layers of preparation as Shadow Creek's defensive network achieved final readiness. Each element had been carefully crafted to appear completely innocent, while serving sophisticated tactical purposes. Sarah Watson's position at the telegraph office coordinated final defensive responses throughout town. Her experience in coding allowed her to synchronize complex preparations while maintaining perfect cover of routine message traffic. The correlation between your arrival and regional stability proves fascinating, Crane continued, his cane marking precise points that suggested dangerous knowledge of Shadow Creek's defensive capabilities. Almost as if someone were crafting specific circumstances to serve particular purposes. Dr. Harrison's medical expertise provided crucial advantages as he completed final preparations for the coming confrontation. His battlefield experience allowed him to coordinate sophisticated medical responses while maintaining cover of professional concern. The storm's intensity provided perfect cover for Shadow Creek's defensive network to achieve complete readiness. Each resident's role had been carefully choreographed to appear entirely natural while serving precise tactical purposes. Thomas Burke's general store completed final security modifications as the situation approached its crucial moment. Years of preparation had created sophisticated defensive capabilities that could be activated while maintaining perfect cover of ordinary commerce. Through various reflective surfaces, Marcus tracked how each element of Shadow Creek's defensive network achieved final positioning. Crane's presence had forced activation of their most sophisticated protocols, while his knowledge of past operations suggested capabilities that would test every aspect of their preparation. The rain's steady drumming masked the sound of final preparations throughout town as Shadow Creek's transformation achieved completion. Each resident understood their role in the coming confrontation, their ordinary activities concealing extraordinary levels of tactical readiness. As Crane continued his meticulous examination of Shadow Creek, Marcus felt the weight of every word the man spoke. His presence was a pressure on the very fabric of their carefully constructed system. The perfect symmetry of ordinary life in the town was now an exposed chessboard, each piece vulnerable under Crane's penetrating gaze. Crane paused, his silver cane tapping gently against the wooden floor of the tea house. "You've cultivated a rich network, Marcus. Each person, each establishment contributing to a broader narrative, a story woven with such care. It begs the question, what is your end game?" His eyes locked onto Marcus, a calculated chill behind them. Marcus did not flinch. He simply took a slow sip from his teacup, the delicate porcelain a stark contrast to the storm outside. Patience, he thought. This is a test of nerves now. "You assume I've orchestrated some grand scheme," Marcus replied, his voice carefully modulated. "But perhaps I've simply built a community." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands as he glanced briefly at the window. The storm outside had turned ferocious, but it was a cover, a natural element in their plan that would make the coming moments almost invisible to the casual observer. Perhaps it's simply the sum of many small choices, each one in its own right, harmless, but together. Crane raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Harmless? Perhaps. But the scale of the operation suggests otherwise. Marcus smiled slightly. That is the art of invisible warfare, isn't it? The grandest schemes appear mundane to those who cannot see the connections. Crane's eyes flickered to the reflections in the tea-house windows, the slight shimmer betraying Marcus's subtle signal. Outside, the town's response began to unfold, imperceptible to an outsider, yet perfectly synchronized. The telegraph lines hummed with activity as Sarah Watson, in her office across the street, sent rapid-coded instructions. At the stable, Samuel Wright's experienced hand readied the horses, their movements calm and calculated. It was a quiet chaos that only those with the right training would notice. "Your town has become a fortress, Marcus," Crane mused, his voice quieter now, more reflective. "A fortress with invisible walls. The residents are unaware of their roles, yet they all contribute to a larger plan." "Perhaps," Marcus replied, "or perhaps they simply live their lives. The art is in the details." He shifted in his seat, the tension now building like a tightly coiled spring. "The truth is, Mr. Crane, that you are here because you understand the potential of what's been built, and because you recognize the need to test it, to see if it can hold under pressure." The room grew still, and Crane's smile remained inscrutable. "And if it cannot, then we adapt," Marcus said simply. "We always adapt." Crane seemed to contemplate this for a long moment, then nodded as though the pieces were falling into place in his mind. "Very well, Marcus. It seems you are prepared for a game of wits. But remember, the stakes are higher now. There is no turning back once the pieces are set." Outside, the storm raged on, its fury building. Yet inside the tea-house the air was thick with anticipation, each person in their own position, waiting for the next move in the intricate dance of strategy that was about to unfold. Crane stood up slowly, his cane tapping sharply against the floor, signaling the end of their conversation. Let's see then what this invisible infrastructure can do when tested against forces beyond its control. Marcus watched him move towards the door, the weight of the words hanging in the air. "Let's," he echoed softly. "Let's see." And with that, the game was set in motion. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.